Good afternoon and welcome back to the second in our series of distance learning webinars that are being hosted by my fabulous friends Jim Sill and Chris Hart. These webinars, as I mentioned last time, if you joined us last time, are specifically targeting the Victorian Department of Education teachers. However, if you're not from the Victorian Department of Education, welcome. You are most welcome to stay, and we are very confident that you will get a lot from this as well. Today's webinar is really going to focus on Google Classroom and getting going with Google Classroom. How do we pivot from what we might have done traditionally in four walls into an online learning space and utilize the power of Google Classroom to help us with that? So I'm not going to talk anymore. I'm going to hand over to Jim and Chris, and I'll come back at the end.
Well, hello, everybody. And thank you, Kimberly. Thanks for bringing us back for a second time. Chris, we must have done something of a decent job to get a second billing.
Absolutely. And in fact, I think we've got a further billing of another 9 webinars coming up. So if this is the first time you've joined us, make sure you catch up on the recording of the first webinar. And we're going to be building over this series over the next few weeks to really support you in your journey with Google for Education, G Suite, and Chromebooks. But just before we get into the nitty-gritty of the session, we'd like to take a moment to really acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land upon which we meet today. And when we traditionally do that in physical meetings, it's easy to say, because we can say, for example, I'm on the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations. I'm sitting on their land, as is Jim, and we pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. But you could be anywhere in Victoria. And indeed, I realize that some people are joining us outside of Victoria as well. And so what I'd welcome you to do is, to find out who are the traditional custodians of the land you're meeting on, and make sure you know that kind of information, because it is a really powerful thing to connect to place. And also to really, I guess, we want to acknowledge you being here with us as well. So our kind of traditional acknowledgement of country goes out to our the elders past, present, and emerging of all of the lands that you are on, and also to you, and thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Well, if you haven't joined us before, or if you're just getting started with using these tools that we're talking about today, be sure to check out this Teach From Home website. It's teachfromhome.google. Oddly, Chris, there's no .com at the end of it.
There is no .com.
No, teachfromhome.google. And if you take a look at this website, there are so many things for you to be able to to use and learn from. So not just with us for today, but if you scroll down onto this website, you'll see things about Google Meet, how to use live Q&A. So we're going to on Google Slides that we'll talk about this week, actually. And then so many other things. Most importantly, it's all about the beginning tutorials. So feel free to use these things that are on that website to kind of grow beyond what we're talking about in our webinars.
And in the past, I guess it's not much more than 10 days, but there is a community of us in Australia and New Zealand who are Google certified innovators. So Jim and I are both in that camp, as well as trainers, Google certified trainers, and Google educator groups, which are community groups that often get together. We have some wonderful ones down here in Melbourne, but they get together and they share best practice. And this community decided it wanted to react to the COVID-19 issues as well for teachers in Australia and New Zealand who use G Suite or Chromebooks. And they've put together a system. So the link is here, www.anzg community.com. So the ANZ Google for Education community.com is a bunch of those teachers who have lots of expertise in using G Suite and Chromebooks. And if you have a particular question, like we will try in the webinars to answer as many of your questions as possible. But if you've got a real question, jump on that site. There's a Google form there. You fill it in. And I believe our response rate is you get a response back in less than an hour at the moment. And just to remind you, this isn't from Google and Google for Education. This is a community-based project where people are getting together and helping each other out. So it's lovely to see those kind of things happening around Australia and New Zealand.
I totally agree, Chris. There's a lot of people going in that are volunteering to help out with that. So listen, today we're going to talk about Google Classroom as a learning commons. And so we think there's a lot for us to cover here, and we're going to try to keep it as basic as possible. And just like last week, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the design principles for core learning design principles. Chris will share some of that with us, and then we'll just give you an overview of what Google Classroom looks like. We'll talk about how to customize Google Classroom for your style and for how much information you want to be hearing and getting via email, etc. And then we'll specifically talk about the stream. And then we'll talk about classwork and really how do we make all that useful to you. And then towards the end, we'll really get into some details about how do we provide feedback and how do we differentiate our instruction for our students. And we'll really kind of tap into what we're going to be talking about in part 2 of this. So we're really going to try to keep it basic. And when I say try, Chris, it's sometimes we really want to go all the way, don't we? We really want to tell them. And it's tough to do that everything in an hour. So we're going to do our best to tease the part 2, but really just keep it as basic as we can for those of you who are just getting started with Google Classroom. And then, Chris, I'll just mention that last bit we'll leave about 10 minutes or so at the end to answer the questions that you're adding to the stream there on the YouTube link. And then and any other questions that seem to pop up, we'll hopefully be able to address before we wrap up today.
And we do have the magical genies in the background. Some of them, Chris Genie is doing things like doing an amazing job of producing and slide switching and video control. But we also have another couple of genies who are in that stream in those comments who will answer as they go. And just a reminder that although today, the outcome for you guys will be you'll feel confident in setting up a classroom which has some authentic learning activities within it and structured in the way you want it. There is a second webinar which we will be doing, which is a kind of part 2 to this, and that will really dive deeply into the kind of bigger picture around how do you shift to wonderful pedagogy, which segues us into these learning design principles that we have talked to people about and talked to teachers about, and what are the really important pieces that we want to keep in mind when we're working with technology. The first thing is that it's not just about the technology, and in fact, you'll notice that there's very little reference to technology in these learning design principles. We know that technology is only ever an amplifier of pedagogical practice. So we really want to we want to focus on how you can leverage that technology to amplify your pedagogy. So we want to talk about how do we build a strong connection between students and teachers at this time. And that is a core piece of the community that is built up in Google Classroom. We also want to know how we engage our students in collaboration around rich learning experiences. And that's the tricky bit there is, how do we ensure that they're really genuinely rich learning experiences? And how do we see some learning growth and thinking in the online space? And that leads us to this last kind of question is, at the moment, we're all, let's be vulnerable. I'm going to be vulnerable for the moment and say how hard we are all finding this and how challenging we are all finding the situation that we're in. But imagine, let's take this design question. This is the lens we would love you to look at these webinar series. Not just how do we survive right now, but how do we go on to thrive using this technology? How might we reimagine this moment to help us become even better learning designers? So our kind of learning design principles sit there, and underpinning some of those are the HITs. Now, if you're in a Victorian department school, you'll know all about the HITs, but essentially they are looking at what are the high impact teaching strategies. And these all still count in the distance learning space. Setting goals, structuring learning, explicit teaching, worked examples, collaborative learning, multiple exposures, questioning, feedback, metacognition, and differentiation. So we've always got them as sitting and underpinning our approaches. So Jim, enough of that theory, which is incredibly important, but let's get into the really practical aspects of actually using Google Classroom, which is the tool we're focusing on today.
That's right, Chris. And I think there's a lot to share in here. And I think really to get started, I love this analogy that you made around Google Classroom. And it's really about the learning commons where kids and you and everyone can get together to really have deep discussions and really be able to process what we're trying to figure out throughout the year and throughout these lessons. And I think that really applies to Google Classroom in such a way that we want to tell you how to use Google Classroom as a learning commons, really kind of open up discussions and not really just close it off. And this is me pushing information out to you, and this is you returning that to me in the way that I want you to, but really be able to open that up. Now, obviously, that takes there's a lot more involved in that. There's about your classroom culture. There's really about what you were doing face to face prior to this, and then and really how you and your students are feeling at this time. And so there's a lot to talk about, right? We can't just assume that you're already there. But anyway, I really think that's an important piece of Google Classroom. And Google Classroom, for those of you who are just now getting into it, it came out about 5 years ago. And prior to that, especially when I was in the classroom, it was the wild free-for-all of Google Docs. You know, it was just kids were sharing a doc and bringing it back, and 99% of my documents from my students were untitled, and it was just wild. And you managed it. And then when folders came out, we were like, "This is great folders." And then now suddenly Google Classroom. I sort of miss the fun of that chaos, but it's for the best.
I do not, Jim. I do not. I'm very, very happy.
So we're really going to be talking just about like how do we set this up, and then and how do we ask questions of our students? How do we get them sharing? How do I share to them? And then really how do we provide feedback to the things that they create and share with me and with others? And so that's really the whole piece of all this. And so maybe Jeannie, Chris, if you could share my screen, we'll just get right into it. Yeah. Thank you, sir. And so here's Google Classroom. So classroom.google.com is really the way I get to it. Most all of Google's tools are the tool.google.com, so docs.google.com, drive.google.com. But you can also click on that Rubik's Cube. Chris, you call it the Rubik's Cube?
I call it the waffle iron.
What?
You know, because it looks like...
Sounds like breakfast. You know? Yeah. The waffle iron is great. Chris, are you gone or am I gone? That's really the question. And so I'm going to go ahead and move forward as if Chris is frozen and I'm not. Okay. So this is what it looks like. So maybe, okay, thank you, Kimberly. Kimberly's telling me in the background that I'm live instead of Chris. This happened to us last week. So anyway, when we go to classroom.google.com, you can see here I have a number of classrooms, really the ones I just play around with. And you can see these, I don't know, these tiles come up. And what I like to do is choose themes that make them color coordinated. And you should also know that you can move these tiles around. So you can group things up the way you want them to do. You can put them around. So just be aware that that's something you can do by just moving them around. These tiles move. And so that piece is important to us. And when I go into a tile, for example, this is the one we're going to be showcasing today. Hi, Chris. Welcome back.
Thanks. I just thought I'd grab a quick cup of tea. I'm not sure quite what happened there, but I'm back. I'm back right now. I hope you missed me.
You're so quick. Last week I was gone for at least a half an hour. So here inside Google Classroom, we can take a look at our theme up here. And so I just want to talk to you a little bit about what happens when we create a classroom, and then what we can do to customize these things. Most important is that as soon as you create a classroom, I'm going to go into classwork. You'll know that you have a Google Calendar that is now inside of your Google Calendar. So you now have a new one, not just your personal calendar, but you also have a calendar called whatever your Google Classroom is called. And then it also creates a classroom folder in your Google Drive. And what I normally tell people inside that folder in your Google Drive is to color that Drive folder red, as in stay out of it. Don't go in there. In the beginning days, don't touch that folder. Just leave it alone. Magical things are happening inside that folder that's created. But as you get better at this and you start to kind of be more familiar with everything, yeah, go in there and mess around with that folder. But just be careful with it. There's lots of stuff that's connected to your Google Classroom. So again, it just creates a Google Calendar specific to your classroom, and it also creates a classroom folder in your Drive. And the same thing happens with your students. So really great features. I love Google Calendar, so there's a lot really that you can talk about with that new calendar that it creates. So you can share things to it, and then And then anything you assign to students inside of Google Classroom appears on their calendar if you set a due date. So really, it's really helpful. So that's probably one of the most important things to understand. And when we go to customize it, when we go to customize things, what I mean by that right up here is this theme. You can see this is a very appropriate theme for me right now. But if I go into this in the right-hand corner and I can click on this theme, you'll see there are lots of themes associated with subject matter that you might teach, or just in general, just colors and other things. I want to remind you that that tile that you saw on that dashboard is colored by what color theme you choose. So I know a lot of teachers that like to color, if they're teaching multiple subjects or multiple preps. A science teacher, for example, might have a bio and a physics and a chemistry class. And so all your bios should be purple or green, that sort of thing, and just group them up by color. It's a very common thing we hear people doing. And I like to do the same thing. Just be sure to go around, click around and choose these, and then just select that theme and be ready to go. Now that tile now is going to turn red. And so that's what it will look like on the dashboard. Another thing that I sort of borderlines in being intermediate at this is to go over here to where you upload a photo, and you can upload your own graphic. And the reason why I mention that to you is it's actually a great idea to do that, especially now. You can actually create your own graphic by putting and then put maybe times that you're available, maybe another email or your phone number if you really want to go that far, or just pertinent information into your class. I really love it. And the thing I want to share with you is, I don't know, I mentioned this the other day too, is Canva. Do you know Canva? Canva.com. Canva is a great website. Now, mind you, there's a lot of stuff that you have to pay money for. But if you go into templates in Canva, and then you just type in here under templates and you just type classroom, you will see this Google Classroom headers pop up. And using this program, and you have to have some understanding of it, but it's pretty simple. But you can create your own Google Classroom header with all the pertinent information that you want appearing on this page. And so that's just a special little tip. Somebody shared that with me, and I just felt like it was important to share that with you. So that's customizing it with the look, right? And that's customizing it just to get your tiles right. But there's a couple other things with Google Classroom that you really should be paying attention to. And most importantly, it's the number of emails you get from a very active class. And it's if you go back here I call these the hot dogs, Chris, the hot dogs.
The burger menu. I don't know. We need to I don't know, mate. Sorry.
I think it's officially the hot dogs. But anyway, I'm going to click on it. And if I go all the way down here to the bottom to where it says settings, inside this window is where you can control what email notifications you get. And I know if you've ever been in Google Classroom before, the temptation is just to turn them all off. Just bang, dude, you're done. Because your inbox tends to fill up with all this other stuff. But I would ask you that you maybe don't turn them all off. You can come down here and you can start to play around with what's really important to you. Maybe you have a workflow during your day to go into Google Classroom for all your classes and just check certain things. Well, if you're doing that every day, you don't need to have an email about it. So you might want to go and turn some of that off. But like your private comments on work, I like to have that on, because if a student is working and and they add a private comment, I really feel like it's important for me to be able to adjust that right away. And so just be aware that you want to be looking for those kind of things. But do your own thing and tick everything you want here. I want you to notice also down here, it's sort of hidden. But if I toggle this disclosure arrow and I go down, this is where I can blanketly turn off certain classes. Like, let's say, for example, I have a couple classes that I'm in, with maybe co-teachers or something like that. I can actually just turn those off. I don't have to I can't be specific about those classes, but I can just blanketly turn some of those off. Like, I can turn these 3 off and leave this one on. I just think those are some important things for you to be able to understand when it comes to email, because your email will just get overloaded. I think, Chris, there's probably something else we could be telling about, but no time today, is how to filter their Gmail.
Oh, wow. That's a whole other webinar, mate. whole other webinar.
You can get all the emails you want, but they just go to a folder and you never look at it. That's the way to do it, really. And then, okay, I'll go back into the classroom that we created just for demoing today. And there's probably one other thing I really want to be able to show, and it's over off to the side. Maybe I'll go into that in just a minute, Chris. I think maybe we share some of those other customizing settings for another time, for another moment in this webinar. Right. So I think the next thing for me to share with you is how do we add kids, right? How do we add our students into this? And I think the important thing to understand about adding students is that in many of your schools, that's already being done for you. So you may have somebody who's managing your domain, or you're part of the central instance at the department. Sometimes that can be managed for you. And so you just show up to your class and all of a sudden your students all appear. But for many of us, we have to use the class code. And that class code is always right here. And I love this because you can click this button and it comes up to the size of the screen. And then if you really want people to see it, especially when you're face to face, back in those days when we were face to face, and I click on this, it's full screen, like it's just for everybody in the back of the room that wasn't paying attention before. But just be aware that I could be sharing my screen and doing exactly what I'm doing for you. Now, most of you are going to want to go and you're going to want to get into this classroom, and you cannot. And I just want to say, Chris, my 3-year-old daughter has appeared into my office right now. And if you'll just mind me, if I could just have you come step out for a second. And this is home. It's like to work from home. And then if you go, that's my favorite thing. It's just so distracting. All right. So here we are. That's your class code, and she angrily just left. So if that class code is great, the thing is you could share that with your students right off the bat, and you share that with them. And then when you have all of your students in the class, you may want to go into that gear shift in the top right-hand corner there, and then drop down and see where it says class code. That's that same class code we had a minute ago. I can either disable that code so no one else can join, or I just reset it and it turns into a new code. And then and that way it's nobody from that other group can join in. You really be thinking about how that might apply to you. But in many cases, if you just have like a set classroom, just disable it. That way no one else can join that class. And I can't really think of any ways or reasons why somebody else couldn't join or shouldn't join right now. But let me tell you, when you're doing this with the general public, there are a lot of ways. So anyways, I just want you to know that is there for you. And I think that can be really a good idea. And then I'm going to close this out because I don't want to save that. And then when I go into people here, here is where you can see the students that joined your class. And so we're so grateful that some of the most well-known film directors have joined our class, and a couple of the actors from there. And then also up here, we can add teachers. So we have our students who joined, and then I can come up here and add teachers. Now, depending on what your settings are for your Google Classroom domain, you may only be able to add teachers that are within your domain, right? So within that whatever domain you have for your Google, for your G Suite. But I like to add other teachers in here. So you can see I'm in here, Chris is in here, and then of course the company's in here. And I like to add other teachers in there because then we can kind of help each other out, right?
So just to reference that as well, Jim, especially in the current context, that it's really useful to think about how can you bring in co-teaching. And Jim and I deliberately, and Google supported us in doing these webinars in a team teaching model, because we understand what happens when Chris suddenly loses connection for 30 seconds, or Jim's daughter walks into the room, and so the realities, the vagaries of working from home. Having a co-teacher, not only doing some of the synchronous stuff with you, like we're doing via video right now, but also having that overview of asynchronous. And you could potentially, it says teachers, but I think what it means is adults in your school. So it might be that if you have LS, learning support assistants, or whatever the different terminologies in different states are, people who support children with individual education plans, they can be added as teachers to your classroom as well. So they can then go in and see what the students that they're supporting are doing. So it's a really powerful way to bring other adults into that classroom with you and to allow them to support the children as well.
It's great, Chris, and I think we're going to show this in a bit, but you as a co-teacher can not only add assignments to your class, right, your own class, Chris, but you could also be adding them to mine. So if I wanted to share something, we'll talk about how we can share that, provocations and things with our students. I could also share that to Chris's class as well. So I'm not saying, hey, I had this great thing, I should email it to you, and then you should download it and do whatever you need to do. I could just share it with you, especially for co-teachers.
And if, for instance, I was the literacy coordinator for the school, or maybe I'm the STEM coordinator and I work a specialist that works across a bunch of different classes, I may have my own classroom, but I may also want to put things into the classroom as well. So many different options, and the ability to have extra adults in there really brings a richness to Google Classroom.
I totally agree, and I think every time I always want to walk around and be like, hey, can you join my class? Because some people are doing this, differently than I am, and I think we're able to engage our students differently as well, especially at this time. What's stopping us all from teaching with each other, right? As we normally would do it in a regular setting as well. And the last thing on this page, I really feel like it's important to share is that I can come up here and select all of my students, and then under the action menu, I can email them. So I can email a batch of students. Like let's say there's only a few of those students that aren't really paying attention, or I haven't seen them in a while, or maybe there's some sort of note I want to send to them. I can actually just select them and then email them from here. And that, of course, launched my Gmail with all their emails in there. And you'll see the information about Guardians. We'll talk about that a little bit more next time, but feel free, if you have questions specific about that, just to drop them into that chat. And there'll be people there that potentially could help answer those for you. Okay, so that's your people. So we kind of covered a lot right there, just to be able to set up our classroom, just to make sure everything is ready to go. Hopefully, if that covered things that maybe that you had questions about, but feel free to go in there and ask more specific questions about that. We can address them now, or somebody can address them now, and we can talk about that at the end of the show as well. Okay, so once we've got everything set up, we want to talk a little bit about the sections of Google Classroom, right? So here's our stream. And remember what we talked about, Chris said he likes to refer to this as the Learning Commons. This is really that place. This is that place where we want you to think about how to encourage your students to communicate. And really, if you go online and you look around, there are probably 3 different ways that people use the stream. And think of the stream as like you would the stream you find out in the bush. It's constantly flowing, and so in my case, it's set up to where all new things pop up to the top, and there's lots of just constantly flowing information. That is, as long as you're putting it in there, it's flowing, right? And so a couple examples that we put in here are just for you to be able to see how we could use this, right? So the stream, a number of people use this as their main hub. So in this stream are posts about units, lessons or assignments that you've put in, conversations that you're having, questions that the kids are having, or you have of them, everything at once. And I don't necessarily know how much I like to use the stream to post assignments. Basically the central hub would mean that a kid comes here to see what you've posted as work or materials or anything like that. I don't necessarily encourage that. I think I encourage this to use the stream as a place to communicate, to communicate to them, and them to communicate back to me. And I'll give you an example of what I mean. Like, for example, we just created a post here, like it's Monday. Hey, I just something about how your weekend went. And then here's today's agenda. Let's say our class is today, and I just want you to have some information about what today is going to look like. You could do this for the week. You could do this for just a few days, however many times you're meeting. And then, of course, you're just encouraging your students to reply in the comment field with any questions they have prior to class today, or something like that. And so it's just a great way for me to say hello. There's other things you can use in here. For example, I could use these provocations or just wonderings. What do you think what do you and share things for my students to be able to take a look at, potentially on topic, potentially around what my classroom is learning at that time. But it could also just be things that just gets kids to think. And so I love this. This from Trevor McKenzie. So I basically stole. I'm not sure how we want to phrase that. One of the things he put out on Instagram, and I just sort of linked to him. But it's great. And then you could have kids who are commenting to it. It's like, oh, it looks like fish walking or something like that. And then of course J.J. Abrams is just a little bit of a I don't know. His behavior is maybe a little bit extreme. I don't know. How do we want to phrase that, Chris?
He's a naughty boy. Yes. And he's posted something on there. So he has decided that we have a Learning Commons, which is a place that we all come together to learn. He's decided that he has put something which isn't really about learning. So lol, who wants to partay? Now this happens in real live classrooms as well, right? But unfortunately, we don't have power in the real live classrooms to do this magical thing that Jim is just about to say.
That's right. We have more power now. And in this case, let's say J.J. Abrams is maybe just is going beyond maybe the kind of communicating I want. And so I can come over here to those the snowmen, Chris. I would call those the snowman.
Yeah,
the three dots, and then I could mute J.J. Abrams. I could just mute him, and then I would, of course, follow up that muting with a conversation. I would maybe reach out to him either by email or maybe in some other way, and just be like, "Hey, JJ, I too would like to partay, but it's not the time to partay. That's later, after class." And so you can mute JJ, and then of course I can just delete that particular post, right? And so, and then now it's gone. And so you do what you want to do. Are you censoring poor JJ's desire to partay? That's really up to you. How you handle that is up to you. Other things you could be doing in here is really just highlighting certain things around what's happening today, just giving opportunities for kids to just share. And Chris, I think you're going to talk about this here next. But can I just show you really quickly, Chris, how I can change the settings on this to make sure that the kids are sharing the way I want them to.
Please do, Jim.
If I go into this gear shift here and I scroll down, there's a section here, classwork, there's classwork on the stream. And here I can go, let me go up above it. So here's the stream. Students can post and comment. That's my default. That's what I think I like. Mm-hmm. I want my students to not only comment to what I'm sharing, but I also feel that the culture in my classroom is at a place where they can also add provocations or ask general questions or share in a way that encourages other kids to provide, to give feedback on. And so I can change that to only students can comment to my posts. So it's a little bit more of my teacher-centered control. And then, of course, my kids are out of control and I don't want them to do anything. So I'm going to turn their ability. Only I talk in the stream. So obviously that's very extreme, and that may be how you want to scale it out. You maybe want to start here and sort of introduce this concept to them. So I think that's some of the best ways for me to do that. And all you have to do is be sure to save and then go back. It'll take you right back to the stream. So Chris, do you want to talk a little bit more about what other things and how else we could use the stream?
Yeah, so if I can just so I've understood it and re-summarize a little bit around what we've been talking about is, Jim, you're saying that that we have the ability to put everything in the stream, and that includes things like assignments, but that maybe becomes quite busy. We've got the ability to have our students just see our communications or just reply to our communications, or we have the ability to really create those conversations. And I'm the same as you. I'm really passionate about creating the culture within our classroom, within our Google Classroom, which I would want to have in school. So I know that I would want the kids to be able to comment and to post themselves. And sometimes they will maybe do the wrong thing. And that's how you learn, right? That's how we learn. So I'm very open to the idea of building a learning commons around that. And what I want to do is just share a couple of really simple kind of tips and content that you can put in this kind of piece. So if we think a little bit about those high impact teaching strategies, we really want students thinking, and we want them being very reflective. So there is a wonderful concept, I guess, which is a thunk. So what I'm going to do is put a new thunk out there for the day. And a thunk is just a really hard question. And it could be related to your content. It might not be related to your content, but it really is a thinker, if you like, or a thunk. And Ian Gilbert was the man who I learned this concept of thunks from many years ago. And if you Google thunks, you'll find a bunch of them. But when I want to post into the stream as a teacher, you'll see that straight away I have my 4, and I've got all my classes in here. So if I wanted to do a thunk for all of the grade 6 classes, or if I wanted to do a thunk for all of the classes in the school, I might actually even tick these boxes and put them all and have my daily thunk. Or it could be a joke. There are lots of funny people out there. Whatever it is, I could do it to just one class or to several. And we'll get into this bit in more detail later, but I could even choose just specific students. So for the purpose of a thunk, I probably wouldn't, but I could if I wanted to. This is going to go to all students. And all I'm going to do is ask a question, and it might be something as simple as, is there more past or future? And I might just leave that up there for a week. I could add things. So I could add something from Drive, like an image. I could even add a file or a YouTube video. I can also schedule those. So I might be on a Sunday, not that I ever did this as a teacher in the 18 years I was teaching, was on a Sunday night with a bottle of red wine, think about what I'm going to be doing for the rest of the week. You could be sitting there coming up with thunks with your bottle of wine on Sunday night and then schedule them for the whole week. So I could actually schedule to do this one on a different day. I could have it appear on Monday morning at 9 a.m. or whatever it might be.
Yeah,
but
maybe save them as a draft at this, especially with the wine involved. Maybe save them.
So you want to save them as a draft and just get someone else to double check your spelling. But it could be, is there more future or past? Or it could be something like, if elephants ruled the world, what changes would we see? What changes would we see? I haven't even drank any wine yet, and I'm not doing great on the all typing. Or what color is A? And if you Google thunks, and we can put a link in the chat potentially to there's a really nice slideshow which has a bunch of these. But you could also get the kids to come up with thunks themselves. Here's the air. And I just want this to go out as a post, and I want kids to comment, to reply to that. So as a student, the students are then able to, so if I just find my student, Clarence, there'll be an update. You can see it just, so sorry, this view you've got right now, which is important, is this is the student view. And the thing you'll see is missing is marks. But the stream is there, classwork there, and people is there. So you'll see that the stream was updated. So as a student, Clarence, that is is there more past or future? If elephants ruled the world, what changes would they see? What color is it? And I can add in my response there. But you can do lots of other really nice things, as simple as, for example, at the moment.
You're back in the teacher view now, aren't you?
I am back in the teacher view. Yeah, thanks, Jim. At the moment, I am reading. And what I might do is actually share what I'm reading right now. So kids might be interested in that, and really promoting the idea of, we do have a little bit more time in our houses right now. So if we've got access to some books and things, we should, I always believe the biggest key to literacy is reading as much as one can, and with support sometimes, but also reading things which are slightly harder than you would be used to. So at the moment, I am actually reading, it's called La Peste by Albert Camus. It makes me sound very, very intellectual. I'm not at all. It just happened to be on the bedside table. It's The Plague by Albert Camus, a 1950s novel. It's challenging. But at the moment, I'm reading this, and what I could do is do a link to it. So I could actually add a little link to maybe the Goodreads website or something. So kids could go and say, oh, Chris or Mr. Hart, if they wanted to be formal, is reading this book. Let me go and have a look at it. And just one or two more ideas, as you guys, I'm sure, will have used things like See, Think, Wonder, and Project Zero thinking routines. Well, the stream is a wonderful opportunity to actually bring some metacognition and some reflection into classroom, and to do some of those. One of my favorite Project Zero thinking routines is I used to think, now I think. So you might put this up towards the end of the class, and you might do, I used to think, now I think. And you might do this at the end of the week, and just pop that up there. and just put it up there as a provocation to kids, to get them to think about how their thinking has developed over a period of time, over a week. And the last one I'll really quickly show you, so I'm making sure that I'm staying on the time, is WWWEBI. And this is as simple as what went well, even better if. And as a teacher, now I'm happy to do this publicly. I'm really happy for the students to see this. I might post that up there and then get my students to think about, on a Friday afternoon, for example, we're all passionate about student voice. We're all passionate about learner voice. But now more than ever, it's incredibly important for us to capture that and to reflect with students and find out what they're thinking. So you can see it takes probably 20 seconds or so to update as a student. So now I'm in that student view, what went well, even better if. This week, I think I was really organized more than last week, but I think it will be better if I ask more questions when I'm not sure. Now, this kind of, here's a good story, Jim, is when I was 18, I tore the nail off my little finger and split my little finger. There's a story about anyway, it's a long story. There's a lot of blood. So I have a real issue that when I type, I often put into capital letters.
Is this from the very beginning of time when this? How old were you when this happened? I have a feeling you were frozen on me again, Chris. But I will say for this, these are the kind of things that I think that Chris and I we've talked about this a lot, just he and I, about how do we want to use the stream and really how to get a good feel for our students, how they're going and what's happening at home. And really just what's the social emotional status of our students. And so using that stream gives us a good sense of that. I want to address, Jacob has had a question in there that really, that I think, Jacob, you were talking about here, can students, can you add specific students in the stream? I think in this case, maybe Jeannie, Chris, if you could show my screen, I'll just want to give you, Chris sort of alluded to it a moment ago when he was posting something. So in the stream, I'm not sure I would really do that in the stream, but I could just go here to students and choose to deselect all of them, but maybe J.J. Abrams. And I could have a statement to him from here. Now, I don't believe, and I was just sort of looking it up while I was looking at that question, I don't think that you can, as a student, message me privately back. So in this case, it's public speech, right? So, and that's why earlier I muted JJ because it wasn't public speech. It was more of a private speech. And so if a student wants to talk privately, we'll talk about how they can do that in classwork. So in the stream, it really is about public communication. But I could, as you're seeing here, I could specifically, I don't know. In this case, Chris, I could actually drop in a note to 3 or 4 kids. Maybe they're in a group. Maybe they're in whatever it is, the platypus group in my class, and I could just specifically send this provocation to that group, and then I could have another provocation for the other group. So hopefully that answers the questions, right? I agree. Riley, I totally agree. I think Chris has really brought up some really great points in there, and we'll try to share some of these links into the chat. But if not, Chris and I will tweet them out on our Twitter accounts. Hi, Chris.
Hey, Jim. Well, I just popped out just to check with my child, my 15-year-old child. I do have 2. Whether he was streaming, Netflix or uploading anything, because I did fall. The vagaries of working from home, right? I did fall off the connection. So I think we got far enough to say what went well and even better if we did that, right?
Yes, you did, and then you were responding back as Clarence, and I think it's in there now. And it's And somebody was just, I don't know if you saw, Chris, but like Riley was just saying, these are some great provocations. This is really how we, I mentioned already that this is how we really encourage you to use this. And look, just look online. There's so many great things out there. There's so many great places. There's so many great people sharing things that you could be putting into the stream. And so we'll push those back out as well.
And Jim, I think there's a real opportunity here for us to think about, and we put that provocation about the start, is to think of ourselves as learning designers in a slightly different way. It's much harder just to, we both know, we both taught, we both had classes where maybe we weren't 100% ready, and you walk into that class, but as a teacher who has experience and some skills, is you can pull that group together. But in fact, what happens sometimes is that in the design world, in the online world, we have to be much more thoughtful about that, because it's much harder to be spontaneous, I guess. Speaking of spontaneity, I think Jim has spontaneously fallen off the call, but he's back as well. We're having so much fun with this today. All righty. So what we are going to do is we're going to segue across to classwork, and we're actually going to look at that side of things now. So Jim's going to take us through some of that organizational stuff, which he is incredibly good at, and that's why I love working with him. If you have any questions about Google Classroom or any G Suite application, he is the man to talk to. But he's going to take us through a little bit of that organization around how we set up classwork, what that looks like, and then we're going to have a little experiment. We're going to look from a student's point of view what that looks like to have some learning activities.
Oh, that's right. And thanks, Chris. I was thinking that you were saying that I'm the guy to go to for organization, and I can honestly tell you no one's ever said that.
You are. I mean, look how organized this beautiful classwork stream is.
It's only taken me, 6 weeks? I love it. So anyways, we're sharing a bunch of things here, and hopefully modeling a couple of things to you as we're moving along. But here is the class works page. So the class works page is really about assignments, if you will, but it doesn't have to be about assignments. It can be a number of different things. So for example, I've created a topic here for office hours. And so if you were on our last webinar, we talked about how you could use Google Calendar to create office hours. And there was a link that came up from that. And you could share that link into here. And then kids could directly link into like week 1, week 2 sign up, or just just sign up for office hours. So using classwork to post that is always a great idea. And then you can see we've added a few things, and mostly, and you may have been seeing it already, we're adding some emojis in here. And you may have seen that on the stream as well. Down here on the bottom, we added some, you could use these emojis to signal to your students, this is an idea thing, or this is a discussion question, or whatever it is. So using emojis can be very helpful. And I know because I brought it up, you're probably thinking to yourself, Jim, how do I do that?
That's exactly what I was thinking, Jim. So tell me.
Well, you could have a certain keyboard that does it for you, but I don't. So I'll just I want to share with you. If you go to Emojipedia, right, which I love the fact that I'm searching live on that's never a good idea to be searching like that on a webinar. So you go to emojipedia.org. And you can literally just type in here like stack of, you can see I've already searched that, stack of books. And then once you get into that, you search the stack of books, and then you get all these different choices of the types of books you can get. And so I'm just going to click on this stack of books, and then you see that right here. I just copy it, and it's like, boom, you're done. And it's such a cool way to do that. And really, it's about just coming in here and just sweetening up the look of your classwork page. You can see down here, I have class time recording. So if you're using Hangouts Meet and you're able to, sorry, it's not called Hangouts Meet, it's called Google Meet. If you're using Google Meet to record your face-to-face time, if you will, and I encourage you to do that, then you could take the recording and stick it in here, and that kids can go in there. They just know to look down for the movie camera and find that. So how do we set that up? Let's look. We just go up here to create. We click on this create here, and we choose topic. Topic are these little segments, right? And so I would encourage you to think at this time to set your topics up according to week. what's happening this week, what's happening next week, etc. You know, a lot of times you would set this up like with units or chapters in a book or whatever you're doing, or maybe it's just, you know, maybe it's just the English language arts piece, or maybe it's a social studies piece, or whatever it might be, however you want to set up your topics. But at this time, I would encourage you to think about what does it look like to have by the week. And remember that that emoji, I just paste that here. I just used the keyboard shortcut to paste that, and I could just be like, I could just say, you know, research material or something like that. Just make up something, and I could add that in, and that now appears into my classwork page, and then I could order this.
But if it's in the wrong place, Jim, I was trying to segue you there. But if it's in the wrong place, Jim, what can I do?
we're just looking at the show notes, and then you're like, I'm gonna sit. And then I just scroll down and I can move that, right?
Yes, I love that feature. It's such a wonderful thing to be able to, and do it on the fly, right? So you can change it week after week. Yeah,
it's totally true, and it's really about hierarchy, right? Like what's important to you, because you know they always say in the design world that nobody goes below the fold. You know that it's an old newspaper thing where nobody scrolls down past that line. So if you just stick it up here on the top, it makes it a lot easier for kids. But you know, however you want to do that, it may be very confusing for kids to have this moving around all the time. You just do your own thing. And so that's how I set up my topics. And you might be thinking about what kind of topics you need for your classroom at this time. Okay. The next thing is we can go into this create button, and we can choose one of these other pieces to share as work. Okay. We talked, I think it was last week, Chris, did we talk about how we're using questions, right? We could use questions. So we can literally just go into here, really literally go into here and click question. And then I can come up here and I can have my students respond to a short answer. I'm not sure I would use that in this space, think about like the stream for that. But I would go here to multiple choice. And then I could just, we shared this the other day, how are you feeling at the start of the week, right? Something like that. And just be thinking like that. And then I could come down here. I could see, awesome, mediocre. And then, I need to talk or something like that. Obviously, take a lot more care about how you're asking those questions and looking at what would encourage you to get what would encourage them to respond. But the reason I point out is in this case, you could say here, I need to talk. And that really gives you a sign that, hey, I should answer. I should address that student. And here over on the right, you see where it says students can see the class summary. I might tick that off, especially if I'm asking more sensitive questions. Here,
if it was a class vote, for example, on who's your favorite character in this book, then you could leave on that summary, and the kids could see like who's winning that race. But yeah, so it's a really flexible option in here.
I totally agree, Chris. And then I could come down here and choose a topic. So I might add that to my week 4 assignments. That maybe this is the start of week 4. I can tick that on, and then it's now the start of week 4. I would not give that a grade. And then up here, we talked about this in the stream. I could also come in here and tick this to all of my classes. So I could ask this to all of my classes, especially if they all had week 4 assignments. So I could just push this out to all of my classes. So I love that ability, as Chris has already mentioned, that we're saving ourselves time in that way. And then, of course, we also spoke about this from that question we saw in the chat, that I could untick that and just apply this to the kangaroo group, or something like that, or just whatever learning group that we have there. So I could tick that for everybody. In this case, I want everybody, but I could also just assign this particular type of question to them. And I just go, boom, I just hit ask. And it's as simple as that. You'll see down here, I think I might have already done this, right? Maybe I'll just double check in here. One of these I think we did last week. Let me look here. There. So here's an example of how does the week ahead look like? So if somebody's like, bring it on, I'm unsure, and then I would like help. Can we schedule time? And so and this is what it would look like for everybody. You could see one person is handed it in, if you will, or answered the question. And then there's still 6 more people that haven't answered it. Okay. so there is that, being able to push that out. And so there's some other things in here, and we can go into this in a lot more detail in other shows as well. But if I just had resource material and I just wanted to share that, maybe it's a link to a website or a link to a tweet or whatever it might be, I could just click on material, and then I could come down here and add material from anywhere. Okay. I like to use material for resource information. So, for example, I could click here, and then I could type in. I'm just going to grab this link from Emojipedia, right? And then I'm going to come back into here and paste that in. I'll just get rid of that B, and I'm going to add that, and then only respond with emojis or something like that, right? One time I ate at a restaurant, Chris, and the menu was only emojis. It was weird.
Was it good? Was it good?
Some of it, yeah. I have no idea what it was. It was like if it was just a brain emoji, I didn't know what it was. So, and anyway, so you could just put that in here, and then you can share that to everybody. I'm just going to put that into my week 4 topics. So I prefer to use material for that. So there's just lots of different ways to be using class work in that way. Okay. How are we going, Chris? Do we feel like you're okay with that?
Yeah, no, going really well. I think I'm just checking our time. We're gonna actually do a little assignment, but yeah. In a sec. There are a couple of questions maybe we could address right now, Jim. One of them, I'm not 100% sure I know the answer to this one. Is, can we turn off from Heather? And thank you so much, Heather. And actually, Heather, two things. So Heather says that there is a Chrome extension, let's not install it right now, called Joy Pixels, which gives you an emoji keyboard. Heather, that's it. We're done. We're going to just finish now because we just want to go and load that into our Chrome browser and play with that for the next 2 hours.
We're going to be playing with emojis. Thank you.
But Heather also had a great question, and it's an interesting one which I have heard come up about this idea of using the question function to take the role and not wanting students to actually fill it in the next day. So it's like, are you present? And they fill it in the next day. I'm not sure you can. We could delete the question once you've had it filled in by the end of a day or a lesson period. I'm not sure you can turn it off, stop. Because it's a little bit like Google Forms, which to be honest, there might be a better way to do your role through Google Forms, because you can then suspend the Google form. And we're going to get into Google Forms in one of the future webinars. We can actually do the role in Google Forms, and then you can suspend it in between lessons. So you can see, and the thing with that, which is better than using the question, I would think, or 2 things is, firstly, you'll keep an ongoing record in the spreadsheet. And secondly, it's also time-stamped. So you can actually see that the kids have done this at, everyone's in the class at 9 a.m. or synchronously or checking in at 9 a.m. And you can see the timestamp in Google Forms, which you can't get with the question function in Classroom. So it's actually a wonderful thing. And maybe we should put a little video together or something around how to do that. And we can certainly mention it in the future webinars, but taking roles that way would be probably better than Q&A from the question function in Classroom.
Yeah, I totally agree. Using a form for that, Chris, would be so much, because you can turn off a form.
And then Jacob can teachers submit responses as if they are students as a way to model? Yes, I believe the answer is. Yeah. So I think we're talking about, if you put a question out there, could you as a teacher answer that question? And once it's out there, I believe you can.
All right. Well, good. These are great questions.
They're wonderful questions.
Let's talk a little bit, Chris, if we can, about the assignment tip. So I think using quiz assignments really creates a Google form that's already ticked on for a quiz. But when we click on assignments, we go ahead and create an assignment from here. Now, the thing we can do is we can create, let's say I want you to write an essay or something like that, right? And then we could go from there, and we could. I tell you what, let's just jump right to it. We'll actually use one where we could have, let's just do like a drag and drop assignment, right? And
okay, just while you're bringing that up, Jim, I think it's an interesting thing. I love Americans. You're definitely my favorite American. But often the language used in things like Google Classroom, assignment, comes from an American kind of vocabulary, and also implies that it implies that it's a big thing. like it's a kind of an assignment. There's a deadline. You've got 2 weeks to complete it. There's this big rubric, and you can do that. And we're exploring that in our part 2 webinar about really chunky kind of learning tasks. But what we're going to do now is just look at this using assignment to just push out a learning activity. It's not a big learning activity. It's just, it's a small learning activity which is going to help you to see my thinking. But I think it's an interesting piece that the word assignment can sometimes make us feel it has to be huge. But no, this is actually a really simple, quick activity we're going to do.
Or even graded, right? That's great.
Absolutely.
It doesn't. So we just have this learning activity. Thank you, Chris, for pointing that out. And here I would just add some instructions to my students on how I wanted that to look. And then I could come down here and I could add something from my Google Drive. I could obviously link to another external website. So, hey, I want you to go to this website and do this activity. And then I could upload something from my drive or sort of whatever on my hard drive. And then I could even link to a YouTube video. The thing is, I could add multiple things. So I don't just have to add one piece to help do this activity. I could even add multiple choices for multiple ways, or how do I want to phrase that? I could add other ways for kids to respond to this assignment by giving them choice. So you don't just have to add one thing. Additionally, I can come over here and just create something right on the fly. So in this case, I'm about to do something that we've already made. But in this case, this example here, I could easily just add something and then create it on the fly. So in this case, I'm just going to go here, add Google Drive. I'm going to access my Google Drive. I can look at the recent things that are in my Google Drive, and then I could just look at upload, whatever. You see all the other options here, and this is a very familiar window for many of us. So if I click on this, I can hit add. So now I have this drag and drop example of this learning activity I can use from here. And here, off to the right, it's probably the most important piece of learning how to use the assignment category, is being able to add this Google Slides activity where students will immediately just be able to see it. So they would just be able to look at it, which isn't, I don't know, you could think of ways that might be useful, where I could actually get my students to edit at the same time. So this is all of my students getting onto the same document potentially at the same time, editing the same document. But in the case of today, I want to make a copy for each student. And so now these students will all get their own copy. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to add that to week 4 assignments. If you forget, you can always drag and drop it there. I could give it a due date. So in this case, I could just make it this Friday. However, I'm just showing you that as an example. And I could just even make it at 3 o'clock and then and go from there. And then I'm going to probably just add some point value to this. It doesn't have to be, maybe not that many points.
That's a lot of points.
Yeah, it's a lot.
So I don't need to, right? I can have that as unmarked otherwise.
I could have it unmarked, and I'll just do that for us. And then, of course, you remember I can choose which students get that, all of them, and then which classes get this assignment or this activity. All right, I'm just going to go ahead and sign it. We'll talk more about what rubric and originality reports are down the track. So when we talk about part 2, we'll get into detail about what that looks like. Just know it's there, and if you want, you can click on that just to kind of get a better sense for what it is. Okay, so once I've assigned that, now our students have access to it. Now, every one of those students gets it. What's really cool to understand is as soon as I assign it, my students have that. I feel like it's already in their drive, and I want to say it that way because watch as I come down here. Here's my drag and drop activity. Look, I can reorder this if I wanted to. So I can put it down below. So I want them doing this other activity first. And then here's my drag and drop activity. I can even move it to a different week if I wanted to. So once I click on that, I can see that 7 students haven't done it. They've all been assigned it. So I go in here and I can view this assignment. And so this is one of my favorite things. See how I just clicked through to get to this? I can look back at the instructions. There are none. I didn't put any. But here is where students, they'll see this. Maybe Jeannie, Chris could show. Chris, do you have your screen set up as a student?
I do indeed.
And so Jeannie, Chris can show what the student sees. And yeah, go ahead, Chris.
So sorry. So it has appeared in my assignment. So I just clicked on that, which I already did. and it opened up the this version of the slide. So importantly, it actually appended or affixed, whichever one's the right one, my name. So this is, Jim, you sent it out to each student to get their own individual copy of this, and Google Classroom automatically named it for us. So as a student, I might be doing some of these activities, and we're going to actually show you this on Wednesday, how to make some beautifully, powerfully, wonderful, much better than just a written worksheet. And often, you know, parents having to print out stuff at home can be very challenging. So we're looking at that paperless classroom. I've got this activity, and we just made this messing about, really. We did have some comments from some of our wonderful friends who are in early years around creating activities and learning activities for younger kids. This one is a really good example of it, because although you can't see what I'm doing in my office, is I'm using the touchscreen on my Chromebook to actually move this. So these are actually real drag and drops. You could be using it on Apple flavored devices as well. So if kids have got an iPad, they could actually be using some of these really simple drag and drops. And Chris, if you want to jump back to Jim's view, I think Jim will be able to.
You can put them side by side, I think, Jeannie, Chris. Can you do that? Oh, that would be sort of technical. So here, yes. So Chris Hart, did you want me to show something in this space right here?
So I'm going to keep working, but if Jim goes into the actual student work on Classroom, he can then drop into, obviously none of the other students are working, but he can actually drop into my slide deck just by clicking on my name.
I can go, even though these other students haven't even engaged this activity, I can actually go and look at the document that they're using. And so in this case, we know Clarence is working on it right now. So I do that. It opens up a new tab. And here I can see Clarence working on his document. And so this is really great. So real time, I can look at what Clarence is doing, and then I can provide feedback to him in the same way that I would normally, right? So I could come in here and just add a comment, which I'm trying to figure out exactly where. There we go. Clicking on this, maybe. Chris, have I lost the ability to understand how to use this? And so add a comment. Where is it?
If the little, yeah, that's the one.
Thank you. I just, my kids are running around crazy. So if I click on this, I could come in here and add a comment, and then go from there. So here I could say, great work, something like that, and then and go from there. And so just do some encouraging. Obviously, you'd want to provide feedback that's a little bit more helpful than that, but I could come into these next pages and just sort of look around and say, oh, I really feel like I want to help him with this, and then go from there.
One of the pieces which we will get into more detail. Jim and I are very aware that we're coming to the end of our time, so we're rushing a tiny bit, but we're getting to this idea of how you do that formative feedback. Like summative feedback, it's okay. Grades and letters at the moment, and this is my opinion, this is not the opinion of Google for Education, grades and letters at the moment are not valuable to students. What we want in this context is real formative feedback. And what Jim's already done is use the comments feature in Classroom to build a little bank of comments already. How did you make that magic happen, Jim?
So cool. What I do is I hit the pound sign, and that comment bank pops up, and I could just be like, here, wow, amazing, and go. Now, I do that by just clicking on this button right here, Chris. I just go in here and add more comments, right? Super, right? Like, because I don't know how to type that very quickly, so I just add that. And then now when I'm in here and I want to add another comment, I just go to the comment button, hit the pound key, and then super, and then there we are. Boom.
But if you didn't, before you actually press comment, you could still actually adjust that, right? So the hashtag, or the pound key, as we call it, the hashtag just brings up the text. But you could then keep going and say, super, Chris, well done. Yeah. And so you get the bulk of your comment there, but then you can personalize that comment as well.
It's such a cool way to do this. So adding that feedback here can be really important. But then, Chris, I also want to share that while you're working, I can go in, just looking at all these activities, and then I could also come in here into this window, and what am I trying to do here? I could go in here and add class comments to this. And then I could also come in and add comments to each individual student. And so I think there's some really great ways of doing this privately. So you can add feedback privately, and then you could also add feedback publicly. So, hey, kids, I see everybody's struggling with this, but then I could also go in there and add that to that student just to have a back and forth conversation privately. Okay, so really, really helpful opportunities in there for us to be able to just work with students in that way. Okay, while I'm in here, I can also show you that, let's say I'm in this window here. So I'm actually looking at Clarence's work, but these arrows up here allow me to go through each student. So here's Quentin Tarantino's work. And
he's done nothing. He's done nothing.
No, it's and it's usually bad. So I can come in here and it's like, please watch your language, and no violence, right? Because no
violence, Quentin,
something like that, and I could post that privately to Quentin right at the front, right, discouraging everything, making assumptions about his work prior to even seeing it.
So just to clarify, that is the comments that you're having and the conversation you're having in private comments is linked to that assignment piece, right? So there's a whole conversation around, this isn't in the stream, it's not anywhere, it's around that assignment. So the student will look in the assignment and they'll see the private comments that you've left as a teacher and can engage in that conversation as well. I think what both Jim and I really are passionate about is how you give that feedback and feed forward to kids in as many different ways as possible.
Yeah. Right. What needs to be said the whole class, and giving kids opportunities to ask questions about the assignment whole class here from this page, and then also what do I need to be saying to my students to encourage behavior or just their work, and from there, yeah, good. You're welcome. This is one of our favorite pieces, and we can dig more into this when we talk about part 2 of this, Chris. There's a lot really to dig in, but we really want to just front load you with this, to encourage you to start using this. Obviously, you'll have to start doing it in order to make this really work for you, and then of course you'll start to adjust what you're hearing us say to what your culture in your classroom looks like. So, anyways, we just wanted to be able to show that interaction with the students, be able to show that each of these lessons is out there out to those students. Here's quickly a jump right to the folder assignment, to the folder with those assignments, so I can go in and look at those documents. And then quickly, Chris, before we take questions from the group, I wanted to share that when I create this assignment, all of those kids have ownership of that assignment. It isn't until they hand it in that I get ownership of that assignment. So as soon as they hand it in to me, the ownership transfers to me, and they become viewers to that assignment. So
that it was a really good point made in our last webinar, Jim, around that is like, when the kids do turn it in, they actually lose that edit capability. So for me, I've only ever used, when I was doing my year 12 French class, I only ever used turning in really right at the end. I was still jumping in the way we've just demonstrated to give formative feedback and to have conversations with the students all the way through. And I really only used the turn it in right at the end as an indicator of, yep, I've done, I've taken critique, this is my 3rd draft, I'm ready to go. This is the one I want you to give me the summative feedback on. So having kids turn in, turn out is not actually super useful, in fact. I don't think until the very end.
I agree. And we'll talk more about that when we do the part 2 here, just to really talk about how do we grade for that and how do we, what happens after the kids turn it in or hand it in. We just want to remind you that we have a document that we've created for you to just be able to inspire the rest of us and the rest of you with your ideas. So how are you already using some of these things? And we want to give you just a platform for you to be able to share ideas around what you're doing with Classroom or any of the things we talk about over the course of the series of webinars, and just sort of pay it forward, if you will. And Chris and I love to look at them and sort of get ideas as well. And so feel free to go over to this link. It's a shared document. It's a shared slideshow or Google slide. And just go and grab a slide and get to work on that. And you don't have to do it now. You can certainly do it whenever you're feeling comfortable.
And a huge shout out to Alice White and Crystal Ryan, who have already put some ideas in there for us. So what we're going to do is, we are really, I think we've done a reasonable job of taking questions as we've gone today, which has been really wonderful. I'm not sure if there are any more questions that are coming through. Sarah McEwen, yes, you can unhand it in though.
Once
you
unhand it.
Yeah, because we don't even say turn in, I don't think, in Australia. Like when you hand it in, you can unhand it in if you want to. I'm not convinced. Well, I don't know. That's just my opinion. What we really would love from you, because this is important, that Google for Education supports the DET, Victorian DET schools, as well as schools across Australia and New Zealand and the world, but we're really concerned about Australia and New Zealand. So any feedback for Jim and I, we do take it on board. It really, obviously there are lots of nice things you could say about our hair, how just genuinely nice the shirt is. That's great. But what we would really love is to have that wonderful feedback around what else do you want? What else could we do to help you? What else do you want to share through? Our contact details are there.
I should have been introducing a feedback form based on that, soliciting comments about your hair there, Chris.
It's getting bad. This is when you see by the time we get to week 6, this is it's already out of control.
We talked about this, and we really wanted to steer all the comments to that.
Okay. So I'll mute myself again. Continue then.
I felt like I had some things to share with that. There's lots of great comments in there. And yes, by the way, if you, Sarah, if you look at using Google Classroom on an Apple device, like a pad or something, the mobile Apple device, the mobile Classroom allows you to annotate what you're talking about right there. So take a look at that. It's
that works on Android as well, I believe, Jim.
Yeah, I believe so too. It's just I should have led with look for the Classroom app on mobile. Yeah. And then you should be able to draw and annotate right on top of it.
And Chromebooks, right? So on Chromebooks, you can also use the Classroom app and do that annotation and give some audio feedback, which we might well get to next time, Jim. In terms of the resources for you is to really start from teachfromhome.google. It's a really useful place to start, and that will then take you to things like the Teacher Center, YouTube, Edu and 90. The Google for Education newsletter. You're going to receive an email which you can sign up to from there. But there is a bunch of stuff there for you. I'm just going to leave maybe this one up right now and pass over to my wonderful friend Kimberly, who is currently going to give us the weather from her garden.
Where's the
she's going to unmute.
Unmute first. You're going to unmute first. Nope, not yet. You're still not unmuted.
Kimberly is going to give us the mime version of the weather from her garden.
That's right.
It looked nice.
Yeah, if you could shoot it on full screen, we could have all just there you go. Oh, and
am I back?
You're back.
Yay! My microphone was unmuted, but apparently it didn't want me to talk. So I was just saying that I decided to enjoy the always perfect Melbourne weather as we come through to the end of autumn and this webinar. Thank you very much, Jim and Chris, again. Lots of great tips and tricks around using Classroom in there. If anyone was watching live, you will get the email from us, which will have the link to the feedback as well as the link to this recording on YouTube. Please do feel free to share that. As Chris was talking about, feed this forward to others and feed what you've learnt forward to others. The best thing I think we can do to support one another at this time is look out for each other and support each other as much as possible. So remix, reuse, repurpose what Jim and Chris have shared with you this afternoon. And then join us again. We are going to continue on Wednesday, I believe. Jim and Chris, you guys are doing the basics of Drive, Docs, Slides, and Sheets to get you up and running. I don't think it says get ya. I guess it probably says get you up and running. And then we are going to follow on with a diving deeper into Classroom coming soon. So if you're watching this in one of the replays and someone sent you the YouTube link, if you haven't registered to be part of this series, make sure that you do. And you actually will then make sure that you get the link each week and as well as the link to the recording afterwards. But that is it from us. Please, everybody stay safe, continue learning. Thank you for joining with us again this afternoon. And please do share what you've learned online. And we will see you again for another webinar shortly. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, guys. Thank you.